Fantastic. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Before we dive in, just a quick few notes. Please make sure your microphones are muted as we get started. And we'll be recording this session to share on our YouTube channel afterwards. So if you'd rather not appear on camera, feel free to take your video off throughout. For any questions, we'll have a dedicated Q&A moment at the end of the webinar after the panel. So please hold on to your questions until then. You're welcome to drop them in the chat as they come to mind or live when we open up the session. And lastly, we're also live streaming the session on YouTube as well for anyone who won't be able to join the room. So we have a team member here moderating both the Zoom and the YouTube chats. So questions from each platform will be picked up. All right, let's get into it. So just a quick introduction. This session is part of the Inclusive City Project, a 3-year project under the Driving Urban Transitions Partnership that reimagines the 15-minute city concept through the lens of social inclusion, diversity, and the UN Sustainable Goals. So our mission is to help create public space that work for everyone. So whether it's multi-generational, gender inclusive, and socially equitable, without falling into the trap of gentrification or over-commercialization. So we currently do this through 4 urban living labs in partner cities across Europe, including Budapest, Oslo, Rotterdam, and Vienna, where we test placemaking methods directly with local communities. And in today's session, Making Place is where we bring some of that thinking to you. We have more than 3 panel speakers today, but we'll be diving into the topics of belonging, care, and experimentations in blue and green spaces, with a particular focus on urban living labs in both Rotterdam and Vienna. And we'll be building on some insights from a series of in-person policy exchange events that were held in each city, where we brought together local stakeholders and policymakers to discuss these exact themes. But before I start, quick introduction, then we'll go on to the panel discussion and the Q&A. But I want to share just a couple of slides to showcase the local context. So these are the 4 living labs, some of the activities that you can see. And then with Rotterdam in particular, the Rotterdam Living Lab is in Rijnhaven, which is a neighborhood in Rotterdam, which was a former harbor area that's currently being redeveloped into a new mixed-use and residential area. And Rijnhaven sits at the intersection of both north and south of the city and between 2 culturally significant Rotterdam neighborhoods, the Afrikanderwijk and Katendrecht, which are both home to socially vulnerable communities with strong, distinct local identities. And given this context, the work in Rijnhaven centers on the theme of belonging, exploring how new development can integrate rather than displace the existing social fabric of the surrounding neighborhoods. And it's been a series of on-the-ground activities with local stakeholders and community members were carried out to explore these questions in practice, as you can see from some of these photos. But one of our speakers today will talk to you a little bit more about it. And then in Vienna, on the other hand, the focus is of the Donaukanal, which is one of Vienna's inner city waterfronts, linking several districts as continuous blue corridor. And in recent decades, it has become increasingly visible as a hub for leisure, nightlife, and tourism. And at the same time, commercialization and overregulation have reduced the accessibility and inclusion, often favoring consumption-driven uses over informal, local, and care-based practices. And against this backdrop, the Viennese Urban Living Lab explores how placemaking can respond to commodification and foster more equitable use of public blue spaces, reframing the canal as a vital urban resource for cooling, everyday respite, and climate resilience. So I hope that gave you enough of a very quick snapshot. So I'd like to introduce your moderator and the speakers of today. So Levente Polyak, who is the co-director of Eutropian. Levente, I pass the mic on to you.
Thanks a lot, Rosaria. Welcome, everyone, at this first webinar of Inclusive City. I think it's a great topic and at a great moment. We're all taking a breath after the biggest heat wave we experienced in Europe, I think, in history. But before we jump into this, I would like to ask our speakers to say a few words about themselves. I would start with Theresa. Who are you, Theresa?
Hello, hi everyone. Happy to be here today. I'm Theresa König. I'm an urban planner, and I work at Superwien. It's an Austrian architecture and urbanism office, and we're the project lead of the Inclusive City project, and also working together with our local partners in Vienna on the ULL in the Donaukanal. Thank you.
Jorge?
Everyone, I'm Jorge from Vienna, Eutropian Vienna. So we're also organization working with Superwien and social design for the Viennese ULL project of the Inclusive City. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to be
Johanna?
here.
Just a few words, Johanna, about yourself. Yes.
Sorry. Thanks for having me. My name is Johanna Kalinke. I'm a social designer and artistic researcher based in the social design studio of the University of Applied Arts in Vienna.
Thanks a lot. Milagros?
Yeah, hello everyone. Also happy to be here. I'm a participatory designer and researcher. I'm doing my PhD at NTNU, and I have been peripherally following the process of Inclusive City and taking these insights to fit into my PhD journey.
Thanks a lot. And last but not least, Andrew.
Hello, I'm Andrew Shaw from Breda University of Applied Sciences, where I'm a lecturer and researcher, and I'm also the project lead for the Rotterdam case of Inclusive City.
So thanks a lot. So we have a lot of actors on the ground who work on the local ULL. This is the Urban Living Lab, so local experimentations, local situations where we try to adapt some of the ideas of the 15-minute city, but also to make them more inclusive as possible. And one of the big questions I would like to start this discussion with, this is going to be very fast because we have only an hour and a lot of questions. So I'll be very, very straightforward with the questions. The topic of today is belonging and blue and green spaces. And as I mentioned here, I think blue spaces, we all developed a special belonging in the last days. But I would like to ask you, what is the role of the blue spaces in your urban living lab or your neighborhood that you work on? What's their role in fostering a sense of belonging? How do they contribute to local identity? I don't know, maybe Theresa and the Vienna team wants to start.
Okay, yeah, I can give a quick first intro, and then I will give it to my colleagues. Yeah, so in Vienna we're working at the Vienna Donaukanal. It's a blue space, a water street they might call it, in the Vienna city center, and we have been tackling the topic of how to make the water itself and also the surrounding areas, the public space, more accessible, and not just for the usual users. So we in our ULL, we see on the one hand the blue space itself, where I can then give on to my colleague to talk a bit more, but we also look at the space that is like next to the water. So we've been working specifically with the people who might not be as present now there, because it is also a space where there's a lot of commercialization. There's a lot of pressure on the physical space there with different restaurants and bars. And so we've been working on how to get other users, such as children, youth, and also elderly people to access the canal better. And maybe Johanna, do you want to talk a bit, tell us a bit about the cooperation with the Schwimmverein?
Yeah, so we work together on several interventions with Donaukanal Donaukanal Schwimmverein, and we work on water tools on tools to bring the water up to the riverbanks, because we think that especially Levente, as you mentioned, due to the heat waves, etc., we really need cooling systems in the inner city. And as we cannot get all the affected people into the water because due to security reasons, etc., we think that it's a good option to get the water up. Yeah.
if people cannot come down, the water can come up. That's
Exactly.
your argument. So, well, in what sense do we talk about inclusion here, no? Because probably not everybody can swim, as you mentioned, but what is the focus of your work in terms of inclusion? Maybe Jorge can also jump in, or Theresa.
Yeah, I can jump in as briefly mentioned by Theresa and Johanna. We are trying to remove water, so we have been trying different interventions in the Donau Canal to bring water up. Actually, like Wasserspielplatz for kids, so a way to pump up the water and make kids playing with this water. And this is for us as a way to work with inclusion, because in the Donau Canal, as Theresa said, this trend of commercialization and a bit of a more commercial interest pressuring the area has been attracting a lot of young people and people able to swim, but for example, elderly and children that are probably feeling dangerous to be there because of the fast bike lanes that they go through the Donau to the canal banks might feel excluded. So we try to find a place. So we try to make place. That's why we approach place making, because we make place for people to come and not just the usual users that tend then to exclude other users. So for the kids, but also, for example, Theresa last year connected a lot of activities with different elderly clubs there in the Donau Canal, just walks or Levin's exercises for people in the elderly to be in the canal, and yeah, just through the use of space. For example, also using some very temporarily some steps that go from the banks of the canal to the water, closing there to make people to make room for the canal to be there, so people could just cool down. And we also built this Becken, for example, bringing the water up from the canal. So in this way, we have been trying to make room for other people to come to the canal, not just the people in their 20s having drinks at night.
Thanks a lot, Jorge. I will come back more in detail to the interventions that you all explored. I would jump over to Rotterdam, and maybe Andrew, Millie, you would want to share with us what's the role of blue spaces in belonging in your Rotterdam neighborhood. Of course, Rotterdam is built on water in the sense that the reason of existence is water, but still, like in many port cities, water was invisible for daily use or for the daily everyday life, for those who didn't work in the port or didn't work in relation with the port. So how can you make it more visible, more accessible, and also how does this change maybe the way people perceive the blue spaces they have in the city?
Yeah, I think the Rheinhafen case is kind of interesting because it is actually a case under construction. So the water is obviously there, is a former basin of the harbour, but it's now being filled in, and also sort of floating parks being added and things like that. And this is still, it's in the future that this will be complete. So at the moment and right now, the users of the space are largely kind of transient. They're people walking through the space to go to other locations or some of the cultural institutions around the Rheinhafen. So when we're talking about belonging, we can't think about people's sort of long-term attachment. We have to think about who is going to be the future user of that space and who's going to be the future person who's going to sort of feel they have a stake in what that space becomes. One thing at the moment that there is, and has been for the last couple of years, is a swimming platform, which has become very popular. It's also become a bit divisive as well, but maybe we can discuss that in a later point. But if you go there on any kind of summer afternoon, the place is absolutely full, and it's full of a mixed group of users. Different times of day, you have different types of users, but certainly the local kids, it offers them access to water that they wouldn't otherwise have. And I think if you were to ask any of those kids on that swimming platform why they're there, they would say it's their place. They already have that sort of sense of belonging, sense of ownership of that sort of connection to the water. So by creating that kind of connection, they've been able to foster that sense of belonging just through access to it. And I think that's the role of that blue space is to keep that access free, but it's also to not strip away the historic story of the site as well. I think it's important that the memories of what that site was is also very important, and not to just replace it with a sort of shiny modern version of the waterfront.
You mentioned the contradictions around the swimming platform. Is it something about conflicting uses or conflicting groups? What makes this contradiction?
It's conflicting groups, essentially. There's where people don't tend to live at the Rheinhafen at the moment. There are some people who live there. Most of the users of the Rheinhafen are coming from the areas around. And as was kind of alluded to, the areas around the Rheinhafen are kind of, I would say, somewhat economically depressed, whereas some of the new developments at the Rheinhafen edge are much more the kind of the typical kind of gentrification kind of signifiers. Not entirely, it's not entirely that story, but where the conflict tends to be through different user groups, but also there's been various sort of antisocial activities happening there. But I also think that that's more of the headlines rather than the true story of the place.
This will raise the question of governance and how we can get different people, different groups around the table to co-manage or co-govern these spaces. We'll come back to this later, but I want to ask also, Millie, if you want to add something, maybe about Rotterdam or in general, what you perceived as belonging to green spaces and the role of care, potentially.
Yeah, thank you, Levente. I think I could add something from listening to all the cases like Vienna and Rotterdam. I think it's super interesting to hear, like the results of the process and this idea of inclusion applied to make blue spaces accessible and make blue spaces inclusive. But I will even add from the process of seeing you, not only this, what happened, but also blue spaces got included into the process. And this pins into the role of the planner, the role of the designer, the role of the facilitators, like you in the process, taking decisions and seeing non-human stakeholders, like non-human agents, as part of the active part of the design process and of the place-making process. So it's not only making place with children, with elderly, but it's also like how do we make place with water itself or with green spaces. And I think that was a question that emerged throughout the process of inclusive city. Even in Vienna, I know you had like a policy discussion, suddenly, where like water appears as a new agent with whom we need to plan and we need to share, and they need to have a stake as well in this conversation. So I think that is a change in perspective, but super interesting to think from the lenses of care, or a careful designer.
It's care, and also, as you mentioned, it's rights. Do rivers have rights? Do our rivers alive? No, so these are very big discussions we can have, and we will have, of course. You mentioned facilitators and people who animate these sites, who make access, and I would like to move on to hear a little bit first from Rotterdam about what kind of interventions did you organize? How did you turn a little bit the place upside down to have to create new relationships? Who started these initiatives, and how did you bring in different people who could be part of this process? Andrew, maybe, but maybe Millie has also something to say.
Yeah. So in terms of the various sort of interventions and things that are happening, I think there's some large scale interventions in the Rheinhafen in that they are purposefully placing kind of cultural institutions nearby and around. So in the last sort of 2 years, the Phoenix Immigration Museum has opened right on the Rheinhafen, and then just not too far away is the Dutch Photography Museum. And these obviously draw lots of people to come through. This is kind of the transient user thing as well. People are walking through the Rheinhafen to get to these institutions. But they are also they are activating and programming activities next to the water, on the water as well. There's also some organizations that we've been working with nearby. So there's a theatre that located to the Rheinhafen 25 years ago. But they have a cafe in the downstairs, the sort of the theatre cafe, and that is they're trying to be a kind of a cafe for the local area as well. So if you want to go and spend some time in that cafe, you don't have to buy anything. Everybody's welcome. But also what they do is on a Tuesday night they run the lab, and the lab is a sort of free open space where people can come and try different things. So there's always an open stage, there's art materials, they often arrange exhibitions and different programming. And that's been initiated by Jorge Gutierrez, who's from New Luxor's, he's one of the community managers, because the importance of connecting those local people is seen as very important for that particular institution. But also within the area, there's so the swimming platform is also this clear kind of hotspot for activity. So we had some Breda University students, for example, doing an activity a couple of weekends ago where they involved local kind of life-saving organizations to help to inform and to spread the word on water safety, which is obviously very important if you want people to interact with the water. But also they were making little toy boats with the kids, and they were all, the kids probably their first time interacting with the Rheinhafen water, because there's very little access to it until this platform appeared. But there's also kind of long-term interventions and storytelling related things from an organization nearby called Verhalenhuis Belvedere. So it's like storytelling house. And there they're kind of capturing the story and the culture of the local area, and they're leading tours, and they're sort of telling those stories and sharing those stories in different ways. And also all these various institutions are all interacting with each other. So they're all interconnected, and they've formed a kind of network where they can all help each other out all around the Rheinhafen, the history of the Rheinhafen, and the future and the current use.
You mentioned cultural institutions, so maybe heavy top-down, potentially top-down institutions. You mentioned community managers more in a bottom-up way. Is there anything you see as particularly innovative as an intervention or a format, something you would like to share, something that potentially other cities could also copy? We have 100 people listening to us right now, and many more on YouTube. So I think there's a lot of people who could be interested in learning some of the tools, some of the formats, some of the techniques from Rotterdam and Vienna as well.
I think there's two that stand out. I think one is it's not so much a tool; it's more of a way of thinking. So the New Luxor Theatre, the managing director there understands that the Luxor Theatre as a institution is it's very Rotterdam, and it's very focused on the city. It's very place-based in that sense, and he understands that that reputation also has to be fulfilled by action as well. So he appreciates that 25 years ago the sort of second theatre was kind of placed there as this kind of we'll build a cultural institution and hope that it develops the area. But he now sees it as, well, we need to actually do something with local people. We need to program activities, and we need to understand our role as a theatre and as a cultural institution generally. So it's also sort of the approach to say we are not just going to be commercial, we're going to also kind of have that social function whether we need to or not. And another approach is the Phoenix Museum that I mentioned. Again, this big sort of top-down, nationally decided that's where it's going to be kind of thing. But they have an indoor public space called the Plein, or the Platz, or the Place, or whatever. And that functions as this like multifunction room that's almost always open, acts as a public space, but obviously in Rotterdam winter, it's a great place to be inside and also connect to local people. You can program things there. So these institutions need to sort of realize that they have this place, this social role that is for the local people, and it's telling the story and interacting with the people in the place that this museum has kind of been placed for various sort of policy reasons.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. So top down doesn't necessarily mean isolated and not, in a close interaction with local communities. So I think many institutions can learn from this. Back to Vienna, and I would like to ask the Vienna team again on what kind of interventions did you organize, and what would you maybe highlight as the most innovative, something that other cities can learn from? Joanna
Okay.
wants to, or
Yes, Johanna,
Theresa?
do you want to start maybe with the water-based? Yes, I can add on.
Sorry. Yeah, we are working with the concept of minimal interventions in Vienna, especially. So interventions that are very easily accessible and not for very long-term, like they don't have to have a long-term use. So one of the things Jorge already managed is the Wasserspielplatz. We aim to activate kids and get in touch with them to learn more about how they perceive space, as an example. And within our actions, we realize that it also opens up discussion with the adults that can go to the Wasserspielplatz with the kids. And from these learnings and from going with the Wasserspielplatz to different places, so water playground in the English term, sorry. Yeah, out of the learnings from going to different spaces with the same object and learning more about these spaces and how you can activate them. And if also the Kneippbecken and the Lido Kleine Donau, a focus week we did with the students from Angewandte, occurred. And there again, they were mostly like one-day interventions, or with the students who went there for a week, just being very like active and inviting people to one space for a short time period, building water tools, etc. And then another vision on like minimal interventions was the graffiti workshop. We started working with youth there, just taking a few cans, going with them somewhere because they mentioned they want to go and do this. And out of this, the Mission Impossible action grew, kind of. So we made this sort of rally for youth, like people between 12 and 18 came with us and did the action for 2 hours. And it was actually, there was a big request to get in touch with the water from like the waterfront. And at the end of each workshop, we had kids coming around asking us if we can also go swimming or learn more about water. So there were actually lots of specific interventions that worked very well for Donaukanal. I think one important thing for this concept of minimal interventions would be that it is a very site-specific way of working. So, yeah.
Thanks a lot, Johanna. And you mentioned different groups, different people, different ages, young people, older people. In Rotterdam, we talked about people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, institutions. So my question is also, how do you manage these different groups together? How can you coordinate people who belong to, in the end, quite different worlds or life worlds? What kind of governance can you establish for them to cooperate? I'm curious also because I just came from a neighborhood roundtable event which we have every month. We talk about the neighborhood issues, we prioritize projects, etc., etc. And also when it comes to water in Hungary, there's something that's called the Great Lakes Coalition, which is a lot of NGOs, civic groups, locals who care for waters which are in danger. So there's a lot of coordination. But of course, when we talk about one specific urban area, the Donau Canal, how do you think about bringing them together? What's the governance between them? How can you have them, coordinate this, co-manage, co-govern this space? I don't know if Joanna, you want to answer this, or Theresa or Jorge.
I can try. So I think what Johanna now explained were the more water-based activities. At Donaukanal, we also had some other activities that didn't involve getting in touch with the water, but also just like being close to the water, looking at it. For example, with we made the contact to a lady who is organizing a kind of physical and mental exercises in public space with senior citizens, and so we invited them to do their format at Donaukanal. So we provided them a lot of infrastructure, and so the governance of this, like I feel like getting together the different groups has been a challenge, to be honest. We really worked a lot with like really user group specific activities. So yeah, this has it is really a specific space, and also our goal to get in touch with the water and to make it more accessible. And we really needed to focus on the specific groups to get their specific knowledge or perspectives on the space. Yes.
Okay, this is very helpful. Thanks.
Yes,
that you actually use the different knowledges. Yes, Joanna, please.
Maybe to add as an example for the Lido Kleine Donau, we just brought together all the different tools. Or also at the Henny and Millie, that is currently also a more long-term minimal intervention going on at Donaukanal. We bring tools there to that are as accessible for youth, for kids, as well as they are for elderly.
Maybe I add a little bit, because now you mentioned Henny and Millie as like one of the innovative tools, let's say. So like what also now Johanna explained were all the activities we did throughout the last years. And like we're in the third year of this research project. And towards the end of the year, we got the opportunity to focus on one specific space together with the municipality of Vienna, and we build a physical infrastructure with shading elements, sitting elements. So we used all the knowledge we got from our activities in the years before, to create this community space at Donaukanal that is consumption free. It's like it is really a contrast in a way, because we're being supported by the municipality, and we created this space that we did also with two more universities, student groups that helped us build it. And now it is a cultural space where we have an open call where initiatives can bring their ideas and do the events there. So this is like the last big thing I would say we were doing in this research project. And I think here we have also it's temporal. It's only over the summer, so it will not. We have to see if we can put it in somewhere else. But it now gives us this kind of physical intervention and space to exchange with different actors. And this is maybe because the two bigger challenges we saw in the ULL was, on the one hand, the access to the water and the connection. The accessibility of the people to have green and blue spaces in their 15-minute city. And another topic at Donaukanal, like I mentioned before, was the over-commercialization and touristification at Donaukanal. So we did want to create this space for locals that can be used, and where people can just sit and chill or do their own activities. Yes. This would be one like the last big intervention.
Levente,
Millie, please.
Yes. No, because I'm listening both Theresa, Joanna, Andrew, and you are mentioning so many methods and tools, innovative tools, but actually I think what is the most innovative part of the tools is that they are relationally constructed with the context. So all the tools are basically different because you have been tailoring the tools in response to where are you designing and for whom are you designing. And I think that has a great value. So for the people that is listening, and I don't know if there is like ready on the shelf and recipes of how to do it, but mostly having this awareness and this flexibility and openness and creativity to create and the process and design the process. And that I think also goes back to what you, Levente, you were asking in relation of how to balance, no, all these different groups. And because you're mentioning the municipality, children and organizations.
The bars that are commercializing the area that we want to decommercialize.
Like private, super complex. And I don't know if there is a recipe for that, but more the art of placemaking or the art of facilitating or the art of planning, but doing it with this kind of ability to bring people into the process, no, like this collaboration, to enable this collaboration.
Yeah, Mili, I wanted to add, for example, in Vienna, in Henry Mili, for example, it is what you're saying, but I think in terms of let's say some governance reflections, as Levente was suggesting, the thing that is really important here is this coordination of actors came through the process. As you say, is really contextual dependent. So one of the things we have to say also, we didn't envision this Henry Mili at the beginning of Inclusive City, but now through the collaboration that were developed through the first and second year of the project with the different magistrats, so also working with a cross-sectorial approach, not just talking to the magistrat of the Vienna Waters, only with the magistrat of the urban planning in Vienna, but talking with them at the same time together and creating connections through these public organizations. Kind of allow us. This is also really an unexpected outcome of the event. Of the project at the beginning. We didn't plan for it. We developed this, and there was this sparkle of the possibility to make an intervention, and from there, all the partners started to create the collaboration, the collaboration with the university, for example, as Theresa and Johanna mentioned, and with the students, and now we are having also an open call for activities to have at Henry Mili during the summer. So it's really a work that comes through a mode of thinking that develops in the action, because also as you mentioned, the recipes, they are not like, we don't have the clear recipes. We're all learning through this project, and also all the listeners, I think if they are interested in placemaking, they know that it's a very malleable concept, that it has a long tradition, and now in Europe we are now trying to adapt this to our local context. So what I want to stress, for example, in the case of Henry Mili, that is very interesting is the fact that it was not planned at the beginning, and then through different collaborations, it came out, and now we are even having a call for activities during the summer in Vienna.
Thanks, Jorge. So it's important to keep these projects open, to have free electrons that can connect to other initiatives, to get them on board. And for those who are not familiar with the Vienna Speak, Magistrat is the municipal departments, and Henry Mili is this venue that you already mentioned. And if you look at the chat, we have there the Instagram page. So I invite you all to follow and see what's happening in this place. This is actually very interesting. And also it shows a little bit also the diversity of events you can do on the riverbank or in the bank of the canal. But let's move over to Rotterdam so that we also explore with Andrew a little bit governance. So also you mentioned about institutions, museums, all kinds of, big, heavy actors that have a very strong presence there. You mentioned community managers. There's no people living right there, but a lot of people living in the neighborhoods. A lot of people are involved somehow in the use of space. Are there any structures, or can you envision any structure that would somehow help these people co-govern and co-manage their public spaces, their blue spaces as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the whole big question that everyone's grappling with. I would say though that what you mentioned there was the cultural institutions and the sort of multitude of users that are already there, but instead of looking at it from who's living there, which I think is the usual approach, because there aren't that many people living there, and those that are maybe a bit of a sort of monoculture, if you like. Municipality of Rotterdam actually does a very good job of participatory approaches. I mean, there's obviously, it's not above criticism, and there's some questions about, say, the transparency related to who's actually invited for these conversations. However, I think as a municipality, they understand what Jorge was saying about the complexity and the flexibility required from a process like this. With the Rheinhafen, it's this huge development basically in the center of the city. It's a redevelopment process that they're trying to avoid mistakes of the past that have led to just basically big gentrification projects. And they have a participatory process that has been, has yielded results, that's seen some changes based on the feedback from the communities. But I would say that, as I mentioned before, you have all these interconnected organizations that have naturally formed that network. And if you can kind of formalize that group of people, because they all have, a lot of them are backed by the municipality or by the national government and things. So they have a certain remit to have a sort of social role, or to certainly what happens in their area really matters to them as well. And if you can involve them in the conversation, and like I said, a network that already exists, it's a lot easier to connect to those people, because they're already institutionalized, rather than trying to sort of reach out to a very disparate group of people who live sort of near or in the location. So, and again, with a more of a sort of future focus, you have to think, well, who's there now? Who's going to stay there in the future? But also like trying to imagine who the future user is as well, and trying to somehow have them as part of the conversation. But certainly connecting to existing networks and being flexible to change plans and things. Obviously, it's very difficult with these big developments, but maybe in some smaller parts of the development, it could be the approach.
Thanks, Andrew. And of course, as Miri mentioned, we have to, of course, consider the non-human actors that were there or will be there or have always been there and that shaped these spaces maybe without us noticing. The last topic I wanted to explore is a little bit experimentation, because many of the blue spaces we talk about, or many of the also green spaces or public space in general, are kind of conceived for, or maybe not conceived for any specific use, but they're opened up for users to shape them and to invent new uses. And when I think about experimentation in Holland, this connects a little bit with this network of cooperation, because what I always felt in some cities, in Amsterdam specifically, that you could experiment with a very tight kind of oversee by the municipality, but also local actors. So if you have this very good cooperation between different actors, then you can experiment safely, because you can go beyond zoning regulations and regulations that are created for maybe other very, very different situations. Because if there's a continuous control of a situation or continuous monitoring of a situation, you can avoid, taking risks also when you experiment. So I'm really curious, what's the approach in your neighborhood in Rijshaven about experimenting with new uses? How does this conflict with safety or considerations of safety? And this also connects us a little bit to what's created for temporary use, and how does this turn into something long-term, maybe something more established?
Yeah, in our case, I think we've had a focus on kind of care and responsibility, but it's maybe from a slightly different approach. So one thing about our area, because as we've said, the sort of south of the river is kind of traditionally the sort of poorer part of the city, high immigration, etc. It also gets studied a lot. So there is a lot of sort of a history of quite extractive research done there, and there's a lot of fatigue amongst the local people in terms of, oh, here's another research project, or this is from the municipality, and so there's a lot of skepticism and fatigue related to the sort of, okay, you're always asking us our opinions, but what are you going to do with it? So our approach has been to try to understand these the sort of local tensions and things through focusing more on the kind of the culture and on sort of storytelling. And so our kind of research approach has been to build trust. That's been a big part of it. So we've connected. So the Cafe Docs that I mentioned before has been our kind of main physical location. But in order to do that, we've had to build trust with them. So the very first conversations was they just expected us to be this university that came in and did some research and just wanted to know all the stories, and then nothing would come from it. So we had to build trust with them. And once they trusted us, they could say, well, yeah, don't worry, like come and do these activities in our space because you know us, we know them, it's all fine. In those activities, the kind of care aspect was that we would always try to focus on kind of underrepresented groups. So it was try to focus on kind of the quieter voices, and also try to organize activities that would kind of give them something. So it would be just either like a fun activity or like an opportunity to gain an experience or develop a skill or something like that, rather than just sort of answering questions, surveys, things like that. We didn't feel that would work. It's made it a lot harder to kind of get the data, if you like, from it. We've had to be a bit more kind of flexible also with finding out what that meant and what the output of that was. But I think it's really important to frame the sort of what will come from people participating in these activities in an honest way. So we have to say, like, yeah, if you write a story about what you would like the future of the Rheinhafen to be, it doesn't mean it's going to happen. But if you've enjoyed this activity, then at least you've had something from it, and we've learned from it. You've had a fun time, or you've had maybe it's become a writing class or something where someone's kind of developed a skill like that. But we've extracted what we need from it. But we're not suggesting that you're going to change the world in this workshop, or you're going to you have an activity that involves the municipality and they're going to listen to every word you've said. So I think it's about creating activities and interventions that understand that people have been asked their story a million times, that they've been overanalyzed, and if we can try to find new ways of keeping people engaged, giving them something that's actually useful to them, and ideally having some kind of legacy. So if we can, I mean, the Henny and Millie example from Vienna, if that can become a bit more, less of a sort of temporary intervention for the summer, but turns into something that becomes a bit more of a place and experience for local people, then I think that legacy aspect is something that we should always factor into to these sort of placemaking interventions to give them a bit more longevity.
And what's the bridge between this? Because you mentioned, yes, the legacy, but also this kind of exploration, this experimental, thinking about the venue. So what's the bridge for you between a shorter term and a longer term use?
I think again, it's the flexibility thing. It just depends on how something or what something becomes, because you just need to accept that some things don't work as well. And you have to accept that we try something out, and if it works, then we plan for it and we think about how we can keep it going. And if it doesn't work, we go, okay, well, that didn't work. Or we can program for something that will always change, and we accept and we design it in that way. So outside Cafe Docs, for example, there's they're called the container steps. It's a sort of building constructed from containers that leads up to the sort of car park space of the theatre, where you can look out over the site. And the idea behind the container stairs is that there is a constantly rotating sort of programming, I guess. So sometimes the ground floor container could be a local library. Sometimes at the moment, for example, it's a hairdresser's shop. It's been a podcast studio. It's has a program that will always change to give people an opportunity to see what sticks. And even things like how it's decorated every year, the plan is to kind of put a new piece of art on the outside. So as the Rheinhafen develops, it also gives an opportunity to develop people's skills, people's experiences within that, as a create a kind of third space that that offers different opportunities and accepts that this is a temporary thing, but it's purposefully temporary. It's planned to be like that.
And also, of course, if you try things like hairdressers, you know, different kinds of activities, this is also something that can create a different belonging. Now, if somebody ruined your hair, you will always remember that place. If you were turned into a completely different person, this will relate you to this place. I would move back to Vienna and ask a little bit the same question about the conflict between experimentation and safety. Of course, in the Donau Canal, one of the main reasons why swimming is still in a gray zone, because there's a lot of regulations that don't allow people to swim in certain areas, but it's not specifically prohibited to swim in general in the canal. So there's a lot of gray zones over there, and of course by now everybody knows when the boats are running, so there's a very, very thorough knowledge of how to make it very safe, the act of swimming in there. No, so my question is, how do you work on this element of experimentation without compromising safety in general? How can you inform ideas of safety through experimentations?
Yes, thank you, Levente. Yeah, as you were anticipating a bit already, I think the point is really to inform all the users and the people that are willing to swim in the canal. And with this, we follow the example of, like, we redirect also people to the Schwimmverein Donau Canal website, where they have, for example, a list of frequently asked questions on the possibility of swimming in the canal. So in this sense, for example, this association takes a bit of responsibility, because of course they're promoting the swimming in the canal, but they're not just saying, hey, everyone should go swimming, but there are some rules to follow also. They also say that they also are aware and say this, that the city of Vienna does not recommend swimming, of course, but it's also not strictly forbidden. So it's really operating in a gray zone, and it is a work of also awareness raising behind this. That is related to safety. Then, of course, what is very important so let's say at a lower level is to change a bit of perspective of the canal, because we heard of swimming. It sounds really cool, but the Donau Canal is not like Bern in Switzerland, where people just go after work. So it's also a bit of a, like I say, neglect or stigmatization around the Viennese waters in the canal. So there's also the change of perspective from people together with the safety. And then maybe Johanna can add something more, because she's more close to the Schwimmverein Donau Canal. She can share a word from within the.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, maybe as a reference, I think there's so many swimming associations all around the world that work on the topic of safety and how you go swimming in water bodies. And the Swimmable City Network might be a very good reference for this. And yeah, I mean, what we do every time we do an intervention, and every time there is the slightest idea of being close to the water or going into the water, is to let Schwimmverein explain how to swim safely, because most of the people can swim. It's just about very much remembering people to, like, what the difficulties are in the fast water and in the water where there are boats, etc. And then I think it's also a lot about trust. And honestly, not only trust making in a way of, like, working with the people several times and getting to know them, and them trusting us that it's also safe to go swimming or to be near the water body, but also us trusting the people that they know what they're doing. And this is something we always highlight a lot when working with people. And also everything that's not in the water but outside is also a lot about trust making, like working with the senior clubs. We had so many meetings with them, coming in their space, being there very active before they were coming with us to Donaukanal, or youth with youth. We worked with associations that we had a long relationship already, so they trusted us to come with us to Donaukanal and to get to know the place.
Thanks, Joanna. I'll ask Millie in a second about how she can maybe summarize, or she can have an overview of how different cities in Europe use experimentation to also inform safety, or create from temporary projects, move towards long-term projects. But before that, I would like to invite everyone in the audience to start putting questions in the chat, because we'll have a few minutes for Q&A between 5 and 5:10. So please don't hesitate. Also in YouTube, you can just put some questions in the chat and we'll try to answer. Of course, we have limited time, but please don't hesitate if you have any questions to the speakers. So Millie, yes, the question is a little bit, how do you see this? Maybe if you can give us some hints, how do you see how cities use experimentation in a way to rethink our relationship to safety or concerns of safety, and how does short-term temporary projects become long-term with institutionalization or
in all Europe?
In all Europe, because you know everything in Europe.
No, I mean, I don't know in every city, but looking a little bit on inclusive city cases, and that in the case of inclusive city, what is interesting is that it's not cities using temporary interventions, but it's more communities, getting organized in different ways, and different parts of a community getting organized to use space and to experiment with different uses. Like, for example, in the Donald, we heard some of these processes. And I think in this bridge of temporary to long-term, what is interesting to also see now after 3 years of inclusive city, and this also can be seen in other examples in other cities, is that somehow institutions respond to this getting organized, and when institutions respond, there is a possibility there for becoming, for permanence. But this is achieved through this temporary or this hacking, this type of experimentations that at some point they open like a new imaginary. At the beginning with the Donaukanal, with the shrimp verein, I think there were like just a few crazy people, crazy students saying like, hey, we want to swim. And now suddenly it's this movement all across Europe where we are talking about swimmable cities, and cities are actually like taking action and building policy towards this. So I think temporary and experimentations are great tools to opening, and unlock new imaginaries of the city that are more inclusive, that are more empathetic, and that we should learn about that, on how to include this into design processes and make them part. And then the relationship with safety, my glass broke. The relationship with safety, I'm not sure.
Or Millie, if you want, I would like to add something what you said about like from the temporary to the longer lasting. And I also saw a question already in the chat, because even though the current intervention of this Henny and Millie, this built infrastructure, is temporary over the summer, but it was created together with 2 different municipal departments of architecture and urban design, who are partner also in this project, and also the Magistrat for Urban Waterways. So, and they are also financing to build this. So we actually, what we did is last year we had interviews and interactions with them, and that we could present them the research result of everything we just told you from the Vienna case, with the water-based interventions, the workshops with the youth, with the seniors, and we together created this idea to do their, for them it's an experiment to do something over a summer, and give us the space there to try to build this process together with students and the local communities. And so I think we somehow we managed it there already, even during the time of our research period. So I think also, like, on the one hand, yes, with the Schwimmverein and the swimming culture, I think that has developed also a lot. But also in the institutional sense with the city of Vienna, we've managed to work there together and build something that's long lasting, even if it's temporary.
Thanks a lot, Theresa. You mastered the art of answering 2 questions in one
Yes.
answer. So very, very efficient. Thanks a lot. And then I'll come to the questions you already started answering. But before that, I would like to also mention to also those who are leaving us in a few minutes, because our time is slowly up, is that tomorrow we continue with another webinar with Budapest and Oslo in the frame of the same project. So please join us again tomorrow for the Inclusive City second webinar. And also please look at the chat. There's a lot of resources, there's a lot of links that you can follow. You can explore a little bit what happened in Inclusive City. And also we are preparing in the frame of the project a cookbook, which will be an inspirational set of tools, methods, techniques that we will conceive in order to inspire you and also help you undertake your own interventions, your own projects in public space and also blue spaces. But back to the questions, we have a few more minutes. We had a question from Jessamine, who talked about making space for the river now. So in terms of flooding risk, how do different places give the river space to expand and use it as an opportunity? Of course, we can't talk about movements of river the same way maybe in continental Europe as in Atlantic Europe, where there's tides. So there's more, regular movements of the river. But of course, we have floods and we have low water levels. I don't know if you have anything about this, and I'm going to collect a few other questions as well, so that you can see where to jump in. Also, question from Kahaus Leitner, how to develop or what did you try through developing processes that didn't work out? What are the biggest learnings? Maybe also how we learn from failures as well. And in YouTube, there was a question that came to us. There's any room for data collection via ICT to inform practitioners and citizens? Any examples how to use data and information communication technologies to inform this whole process?
I would like to answer some maybe a little bit and also add something that we didn't mention before, what has been a big part of the research project. In the sense of care, we've also been researching about, like, our big research question was how to make placemaking more inclusive. And one of the ways was to think of our practice as facilitators in workshops and activities. So for example, because the question regarding the ICT, it's not really it's not a shared data collection with the participants, but we've tried to do efforts to constantly reflect on our own practices. To after we hold a workshop, we have a form that we fill out with not just the basic data that we collect, but kind of also how we interpret different things, also the embodiment of the people and of ourselves, and also to really think of our role as facilitators, because we've noticed that this is like a big, it is in a way a type of care work, you can say, if you really do the effort to not create the standard participatory activities, but if you really dive into it, and that's what we've been trying to do throughout this research project, to really focus on the specifics of the place and also really take into account the needs of the people. Yeah, that was just a reflection there. And also maybe one of the learnings, the biggest learning for me personally was this, to be really reflective, and you cannot always have it right on the first go, and be open to criticism.
Thanks, Theresa. I open the floor to any of the speakers who would like to answer some of the questions. We talked about making space for the river in terms of floods or retreat of the water. We talked about data collection, learnings from failures. Anything you would like to add? We have 5 more minutes for this.
I can add something about the space for the river question, because I think in Rotterdam it's very sort of prescient at the moment. So there's an intention to have a sort of a much more soft edges to the river in Rotterdam. It's a tidal river. It's about sort of a meter and a half kind of tidal movement. So there's already kind of quite high embankment sides to the river, and also because it's a really working river, so it's a lot of shipping coming through. One thing that the Rijnhaven Park is designed to do is also to kind of accept that tidal flow, and to sort of have different different ways of accessing the river in different tidal states. There's also a nice, this isn't to do with the Rijnhaven, this is in a different part of Rotterdam. There's a park called, I think it's called Keiler Park. It's Keiler something, it's either Keilerhaven or Keiler Park, but I think the area is Keilerhaven. And that's been designed as a tidal park, where, different times of the day you have a completely different park. So it's some days you have the sand, or sometimes of the day you have the sand, sometimes of the day you're more just sort of up on the grass. And the sort of nature inclusive aspect of that was immediate. When they installed it, within a few weeks you had some quite rare bird life and other animals using that park. And I think that's the Rotterdam has learned a lot about the sort of these interventions like this, like allowing that sort of fuzzy edge of the river to have a big impact on sort of the non-human, but also like the human experience of the river. I think when the swimming platform opened, for example, the overriding response was, why would you want to swim in the Nieuwe Maas River? It's disgusting. But I think there's a similar response in Vienna with the Donau Canal, and obviously they tested the water and it's clean enough. But people's relationship with the water is so much led by the idea of cleanliness of the water, of the sort of industrial heritage or whatever. So by creating space for the river, creating these kind of fuzzy edges, allowing access to it, allowing the sort of the animals to also come out of the water, is a real way to kind of give space for the river in that sense, and to change the relationship with it.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. And we can also link this to the data and working with data. I remember in Atlantic Spain, you have a special app that tells you in every city the tide situation. So I'm sure Rotterdam people know it somehow when the river is where, and so they can relate to this. And also there's plenty of things. Also, I'm sure there's bird watching clubs and all kinds of documentation platforms. So besides the research you are conducting with humans, I'm sure there's a lot of enthusiasm also to explore the non-human life of the rivers. I'm afraid that this is the end of today's discussion. We're in time. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for spending this afternoon with us. It's not, we weren't sure if 1st of July will be a very easy moment, but I think there's a lot of people who made it. Again, please remember to join us again tomorrow for a second round with Oslo and Budapest. And please explore the resources that we shared here in the chat, but also if you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Placemaking Europe website, Inclusive City, you will have access to all these resources. I don't know if Rosaria wants me to give it back to her as the host.
It's all good. I will make sure that this is also available on YouTube. So if you know any colleagues that would like to rewatch or watch the webinar, it will be available. We will send you a link. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you,
And
everyone.
have a great rest of your afternoon.